Plots are 10 feet wide and 20 feet long. And on each one of those plots, we hand applied fertilizer at different rates from 0 to 120 pounds. Now, we never recommend you put 120 pounds of nitrogen on stockpiled tall fescue, but we wanted to bracket our recommended range, which is somewhere between 40 and 60 pounds of nitrogen in most cases. So we've got two different nitrogen sources. A company called me this summer and said we'd like to test a new nitrogen product we're making, and so we put together a little test for them. They've got a product that's organic-based product. They take organic materials, they take those materials, they digest them in sulfuric acid, which gives them a really low pH. It's kind of like a motor oil with a pH of 0.1, and then they add anhydrous ammonia to it to bring the pH back up to around a 6, and then they prill that liquid and make it into a little fertilizer pellet, and then that product has 16% nitrogen, and then it's got sulfur in it too, and that's one of the angles they're using to market that product, is that additional sulfur. Whether we need that or not on our pastures, we don't know for sure in Kentucky. Most of our work shows that we don't get a big response to sulfur fertilization. We have a lot of coal burning power plants, and that's depositing sulfur in the atmosphere. But that's getting less. If you look at the last 25 years, sulfur deposition has decreased to about 25% of what it was in the last 25 or 30 years. So we may need it sometime in the future. So that's kind of a little bit about the study. I wanted to talk just a little bit about stockpiling in general. This is a forage test that was taken to stockpile on February 10th. Crude protein of 16%, a TDN of 60%. That's enough energy and enough crude protein to meet the needs of a lactating brood cow. This is an important part of stockpiling. Stockpiled tall fescue is normally higher in forage quality than most of the hay that we make in Kentucky. And that's really important to remember. We're going to talk about hay quality as we move through the stops today. So go ahead and go to the next one. So one of the advantages is that increased forage quality. This is some nitrogen work that I've done in the past, and it just shows a nice nitrogen response for stockpiled tall fescue. So this is no nitrogen up to 120 pounds, and we've got a nice response. Not all fertilizers are as effective as stockpiling as others. Our most effective one was ammonium nitrate. We got the steepest curve on our line. Our least effective was urea ammonium nitrate, or liquid nitrogen. And then in the middle was urea, and the reason urea is kind of in the middle is that not as a bad nitrogen source, but when we put it on this time of year, we'll get a lot of volatilization from that urea. A lot of it will go up into the air unless we get rain immediately after application. So if you're going to use urea, try to use some kind of a product like Agritane that limits volatilization. That works for maybe 7 to 10 days. Helps to limit volatilization, or apply it immediately before rainfall. And that's easier said than done in most cases. All right, let's go on. I want to get to the bare bones of this stockpiling, and really it's the economics. And I wanted to go through some calculations to talk about what it costs to feed a brood cow with hay. Hay's our single biggest expense in brood cow budgets in Kentucky. And I say that hay costs about $100 a ton, and you can argue with me about that. You can say, well, I can buy it for $60, and you might be able to buy it for $60 a ton. A lot of times the hay that you get for lower price, you kind of get what you pay for. It may be a lot of broom straw in it and not too good a forage quality. So it's important to consider forage quality, and we'll talk about that in one of our remaining stops. And if you're honest with yourself and you sit down and you go through a hay budget and you look at the fertilizer you put into producing that hay, you look at the equipment cost if you have to have a baler and a hay rake and a tractor and so forth to make that hay with, and then you look at your other expendables like twine or net wrap or fuel and so on, and you put a little bit of money in for your labor. I know everybody works for free here, but you value your labor in a little money, you're going to come out to about $90 to $100 a ton for hay, pretty consistently. All right, so I put in a charge of $20 per ton for feeding costs. So hay doesn't feed itself. You've got to get on a tractor, you've got to haul it out there, you've got to put it out for the animals, whether you're rolling it out or you're putting it in a feeder or putting it in some kind of a feeding unit. There's a cost associated with getting that hay out there, and I said $20 per ton to haul it out to those animals. And then you got to consider storage and feeding losses, and I put 20% in my calculation here, but really that's pretty conservative. You can have, if you're storing hay outside, you can have feeding and storage losses in that 30 to 40% range. That means, you know, almost a third to half your hay is just being lost in the feeding and the storage losses. And that's well documented in the literature. I use 20% here to be conservative. And when I put all those numbers in my calculations and to tell me how many feeding days I get per ton, I get 53 feeding days per ton of hay. That means 1 ton of hay could feed 1 cow for 53 days or 53 cows for 1 day. So when I add my costs up, $120 for that production and feeding, so that's $120, and I divide it by my number of feeding days, I come out with a feeding cost of $2.25 per feeding day for just the hay. Now remember, most of our hay will not meet the nutrient requirements of a lactating brood cow in the fall. It's going to be lower than she needs to keep condition on. So we're going to need to add just a little bit of supplement in many cases, 75 cents per day for some corn gluten feed, and that all of a sudden brings us up to about $3 a day for hay feeding plus a little bit of supplement. That's pretty close to real cost. You can might be able to get it down to $2.25 to $2.75 depending on what you're supplementing with and the quality of your hay, and we'll talk more about hay quality as we go on. So remember, $3 a day. What's stockpile cost? We're assuming 2,500 pounds of dry matter production. That's pretty good assumption. We normally get between 2,500 and 4,000 pounds of dry matter in my experience, depending on the fall. It's going to cost us about 65 acres to stockpile, $65 an acre to stockpile, so that includes fertilizer and our feeding costs. So about $40 worth of $40 to $45 worth of fertilizer and about $20 per acre feeding cost. And the feeding cost is kind of strip grazing that tall fescue, and that's taking an electric fence in these temporary posts and giving them just a little bit at a time to extend the number of grazing days we get per acre. We're assuming a utilization rate of 70%, so that means 70% of what's in that pasture gets in the stomach of the animal. 30% of it's going to get soiled, trampled, and so forth. We're figuring 70% is going to get into the stomach of that animal, and that is a result, that 70% utilization rate is a result of strip grazing. So when we do all the math here, we're going to get about 70 grazing days per acre with stockpiled tall fescue. So again, 1 cow for 70 days or 70 cows for 1 day. And when we do the math, $65 divided by those 70 grazing days, we come out with about 90 cents a day to feed that cow with stockpiled tall fescue. So about $1, say $1. What it costs for hay? $3. So we can reduce this to a third of the cost, hay feeding, somewhere between a third and a half, if we use stockpiling in our grazing system. We won't be able to go without hay, but if we can reduce our hay feeding period by about 60 days, you know, we can have significant savings in our winter feeding program. All right, is there any questions? All right, we're going to move to the next stop. I'd like to introduce Adam Jones. Adam Jones is our state grassland specialist for the NRCS. He set a demonstration on well-managed and poorly managed pasture and its erosion potential, and he's going to tell you a little bit about that demonstration.
I'm thankful that you all are here today, and I was thankful that UK invited us to participate. What we want to talk about is kind of wedging between the pasture segments of this stop and look at what a well-managed pasture does. As you can see, we've got the clear jugs beneath, and imagine right now how badly you need rain, what it means for you if you got a little bit of it, and then how can you maximize what you get. We can see clearly if you know at your home what runoff from your roof would be like. You can see the examples of a heavily used conventional tilled, maybe it's a tobacco system, and then you can see the differences, you know, maybe a cover crop versus a poorly managed pasture and a well-managed pasture. We often hear when we talk about grazing that the importance is that you leave half and take half, and that you manage your grasses, that you're always leaving some. Dr. Smith and Dr. Teutsch would tell you that it's also about leaving that photocell, that you have that ability to continue to grow grass because you've got the leaf area to absorb sunlight. Working for the Natural Resource Conservation Service, I agree with what they're saying, and wholeheartedly. I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about what it does for infiltration of the rain we get, reducing the runoff of the rain we get, what we see eroded on your fields, and then most importantly, what we're not losing. And if you can go down here and look at the far end, as the water accumulates in these buckets, our well-managed pasture has less runoff and it's clear. Now, I'm not going to ask anybody in this group to drink it. There's clean water over here under the shade cloth. But what's coming off as compared to the others, it's just as clear as what runs off your roof. And yet you can kind of see the difference between what's running off. We don't have nearly as much. So right now, if you all got rain on this end of the state, you'd want to capture every ounce of that rainfall. And a well-managed pasture will help you do that. And it's for several reasons. One reason is we've got the roots that are going down into the soil that allow that water to percolate through. And then we've got all that grass and detritus on the surface that's slowing the passage of water. So what we end up with is a lot more water saved that then the grass can use and grow, because we don't know what you're going to get and how much you're going to get. If you want to shut that off. This is based on 3 inches an hour, which is that's pretty. I mean, let's face it, that's pretty aggressive rainfall. But I've only got a few minutes of your time, and simply it gives you a great visual assessment of what we're seeing run off. And then understand that all these soils have already been wetted once. So some of it's already full, so we're getting a little more coming through the bottom of the tray. But the important takeaway today is what we don't see running off. We're not seeing soil being carried away. If you did put fertilizer down, we're not seeing your fertilizer carried away as it attached to a soil particle. So what you put onto that land and in what you've managed that land to do, you're getting the most out of it. So I know here in the next stop, you'll hear a little bit more about fertilization, and you heard about fertilization here. And, in the Mississippi Basin, anything that we don't see it running off and staying on your ground is money that you spent that you're getting full use out of. And that's what we fully understand. If you have any questions, I'm going to be here all day. I'll be happy to answer them. If you're concerned about it, or you want to see this trailer, or you've got a meeting, if you're a cattleman, you're on a conservation district board, you're on a board of education, you can stop by your local conservation district office, and they'll put you in touch with the NRCS, and we can bring the trailer out. And it's a great opportunity to show people even if it's somebody that lives in town, mowing your grass, what runs off on your roof versus what a well-mowed lawn. We do this with kids. The kids love it. Anything with water and dirt for kids, you have their attention. We'd be happy to do that. And then if this triggers you that you're starting to think about, what could I do on my farm? What changes could I bring about? Do I need more troughs? Do I need more fence? Do I want to improve my forages? Do I want to improve pasture management? Stop by your conservation district office and just say, hey, I'd like the NRCS to come out to the farm, and we can sit down and talk to you a little bit about planning and what we can do. And then if you want to take it to the next step and look at some financial assistance, maybe to help put some of these in and defray your costs to put some of these in, we'll be happy to talk to you about that as well. Are there any questions?
All right, guys, to me, the most important part of this stop is that as cattle producers and forage producers, we're harvesting more water with a good sod. So we're capturing sunlight with that good sod, but we need that water. We want to eliminate, ideally no water should run off of our farm. We need to have it covered with a good sod that's letting that water infiltrate into the soil, and that water is going to get turned into grass. All right, let's thank Adam for his presentation.
We'll talk about the whole range of them, but my main point in talking about annuals is what can you plant to get some good quality, good grazing in the fall or the following spring, and then several of these also make an option as a silage or hay crop. So when you think about a forage or an annual that you can plant to get some good forage, the first two choices that you probably think of, or at least that I think of, the first would be cereal rye. Can be planted anytime from about mid-August even into October, but you can start grazing it 4 to 6 weeks after planting or after it emerges. So you've got fall grazing, you've got spring grazing, so it's a nice option, quick up, fall grazing, spring grazing. The limitation is once it goes to head in the following spring, then the quality drops way off. So you've got to make use of it. You have to take a really early cut of hay. You probably couldn't even get the hay dry. So you'd have to take an early cut of silage. But it fits in well for grazing, the cereal rye. The other traditional option is wheat. We all know wheat is planted for grain, planted for cover crop. Typically not planted until October. Definitely if you don't plant it in October, you're not going to get any fall growth. If you plant it back in September, sometimes you're going to have fall growth. But the main benefit of wheat is you have the growth in the spring for grazing. It also maintains its quality up to a soft dough stage. So cutting it for hay or cutting it for silage, you've got that benefit. But I'm not really talking about as much detail about either of those today. Both of those are still good options. I'm talking about a few different mixtures that I've got here, and I'll talk about the reasons for these mixtures. So the first one, we've got a mixture of oats, and these are spring oats or a jerry type oat, so they would not survive the winter. Next is an annual ryegrass. So oats at 100 pounds per acre, annual ryegrass at 15 pounds per acre. If you planted annual ryegrass by itself, you'd be planting more like 25 pounds per acre. And then Kentucky Pride Crimson Clover. That's a newly released crimson clover from University of Kentucky that survives. We've never seen a case where it didn't survive the winter. The normal crimson clovers, about 50% of the time, will not survive our winters. The last one there is a forage type brassica. Usually when I say the word brassicas, what you probably think about is a turnip. And turnips make great fall grazing, but the traditional turnip, you just get one growth, like a purple top type turnip. You'd plant it in late August, and you'd be able to graze it in November, but you'd strip graze it because it's not going to come back after grazing. So this particular forage type brassica or forage type turnip hybrid will come back after grazing. So you've got benefits of all of these with the high quality of the turnip, high quality of the oats, annual ryegrass. The crimson clover is not going to do much until next spring, but you've got quality in the spring. The limitation when you look at this, you've got a lot of benefits. Limitation is there's a fair cost in a mixture like this. Getting that winter hardy crimson clover costs a bit more than just the common seed. But as I mentioned, we've got benefits of all of this. As Chris and I were talking a little bit earlier, we made the comment, you look at this and you say, well, that sounds good, but that's a fair bit of cost. I don't want to try that. You don't have to get this complicated to be planting an annual. Like I mentioned wheat or rye before, but just planting annual ryegrass and adding nitrogen would be an option for some late fall grazing and very good grazing through the spring. It would be the highest quality of any of the annual grasses to plant.
And you could do that for $20 or less an acre if you just plant annual ryegrass.
My kind of deal.
So let me, I'm going to mention a couple of the pubs I have here. First, there's the Forage Crop Pocket Guide that has a lot more information than just this, but it talks about the adaptation of these different annuals, the seeding rates of these annuals, even the forage quality at the end. We've also got a couple of our variety test publications. The one on annual ryegrass. The big thing on annual ryegrass, obviously you want it to yield well and be adapted, but you want to make sure it survives the winter. So make sure that when you buy the annual ryegrass seed, you know what the variety is. And you know either from our report or from the seed company that it's going to be one that survives the winter. We've also got a report that shows some production of some of the summer annuals and some of the winter annuals like I'm talking about. One additional thing we've got in the annual report is what about if you get to next March and you realize that you think you're going to be short on hay or short on forage. What could you plant in middle of March and get some forage really quick? The best option, the traditional option, is planting oats. Okay, you definitely plant a spring type oat. There'd be no point in even thinking about a winter oat. We've gotten from 1.5 tons In 1 year with good weather, we even got 4 tons per acre with planting that spring oat. But you know, you'd kind of figure about 1.5 tons to 2.5 tons as a silage cut or as a hay cutter. You could even plant oats. These were just planted 10 days ago. You could even plant them and use them for some grazing, but typically they're cut for a short-term hay crop. You'd be cutting them 60 days after planting in the spring. An important point when you look at these mixtures, you can almost think to yourself, the earlier the better. Turnips will handle hot weather. They're going to take about at least 45 days before you can start grazing. So they're best to plant back in August. The oats will do fine planting in August. Rye will as well. I mean, Chris, even annual ryegrass would do okay.
As long as you get a little moisture, yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be fine.
So earlier the better to some extent. But we're talking today. We're talking into September. What could you do right now? There wouldn't be much point in planting turnips now as far as having any forage available. Turnips aren't going to survive the winter. Oats are going to give some quick growth, so that would be an option. These spring oats will winter kill. Annual ryegrass planted now would be a nice thing for next spring. You're not going to get a lot of growth this fall. If you want fall growth, early winter growth, then probably the oats and the fall rye. The fall rye would come back the following spring. Chris, any other comments to follow up on?
Generally with the oats, I like to put annual ryegrass on them because the oats will give you fall grazing but winter kill, and then the annual ryegrass will come back in the spring and give you spring grazing. So that's a pretty nice mixture there. And you can take a look at these pots. We've got annual ryegrass and crimson clover here. We've got oats and brassicas here. This is oats and crimson clover, and then this is oats, ryegrass, and brassicas in this pot.
Can you interseed those in like now? Like no-till those into a pasture now?
We just no-tilled some in. We actually have 2 strips of these no-tilled in up past that white building, but we haven't had much rain. We can row them, but there's not a lot of growth on them yet. We hope to get an inch of rain this weekend, and that will really bring those on.
Chris, did you spray that out first, or was it just straight into the pasture?
We did. We had mostly annual grasses there, some weedy grasses and some grasses we planted there, and we clipped it and sprayed it out with a little bit of glyphosate, and then we no-tilled into that.
So if you really want the production, then killing what's there. Like what we're standing in right now, there's a fair bit of annual grasses and things like that. If you've got a lot of crabgrass, things that you know are going to die off at frost, then you could go into an existing pasture. But if you've got a fair bit of fescue and other grasses, by the time that the annuals get really started, the fescue is going to be coming back. So it's really not worth the effort just to put them into an existing pasture unless it's got a lot of warm seasons or a lot of bare soil.
All right, we probably need to move to our next stop. We've got 2 more stops to make.
Okay guys, so like Chris told you, my name's Raymond. I am Chris's field technician here at Princeton. We weighed these 3 hay bales. They're labeled 1, 2, and 3. We're going to ask y'all to write down your guesses on what they weigh and then a total weight for the entire lot. And we're going to give you about 3 minutes, so kind of do it quickly and we're going to get you on to the next stop. Once you get your guesses, hold on to your sheet of paper and we're going to trust that you're going to be honest with us. And the person who gets closest on each bale will get a prize.
So, you know, nutritional value we're going to talk about the next stop is really important, but it's also important to know how much your hay weighs so that you can budget it out for winter, make sure you're putting enough out for the animals, and make sure you're going to have enough to make it through the winter. Unfortunately, many producers don't get the weight as close as they think they do in terms of estimating that weight. It's always a good idea if you can weigh a few bales to weigh them to see if you're as close as you think.
So we do have a few bales that have been put up in the barn. We have a bale that's been set outside. I will tell you this, me and Chris weighed these bales yesterday and I raised some cattle back home in Ohio County and we were shocked at what these bales weighed.
I'm a forage specialist and I got them wrong. So yeah, I think you'll be surprised.
So if you want to go ahead and start wrapping your guesses up and then we'll see how many winners we've got. Everybody ready?
Make sure and sum up your 3 bales, and then we'll get the grand champion. Whoever gets the closest total weight will get the grand champion prize.
Okay. Bale number 1.
Hold on, we got one more.
Oh, got one more?
Take your time. All right.
All right, are we ready?
Yep.
Okay. Bale number 1. Somebody give me a guess.
1,300.
Okay. Somebody else.
Not too bad. Go ahead.
1075.
1075.
1,832 pounds.
18. We weighed them yesterday, and I put Connor on the scale to make sure it was working because I didn't believe it. And it was right on. The scale was right on.
So,
This is made with a new John Deere baler. Very dense bale. The farm crew did a great job baling it up. And when Connor cored these bales for hay samples, we could barely get the hay probe into these bales. They're so tight.
we actually broke the hay probe on one of these bales.
Yeah. So, so who's the closest to 18? What was it?
1832.
Who's the closest?
That's 1,400.
1,400? Do we have a
I have 15.
1,600?
I got 1645.
1645 so far?
Anybody closer than
Anybody higher
1645?
than 1645? All right, we
Okay.
got a winner.
Good deal.
How about number 2?
Somebody give me a guess.
I had 1,400, but that's got to be more.
Okay. Who else?
1,800.
1468.
1468.
Anybody closer than 1,400?
1435.
1435.
Cutting it close.
Wow. Anybody closer than 1435? That's pretty good.
Except for the first one. 15, Chris.
Okay. Last bale here. Give me a guess.
1,200.
1200. Somebody else.
And 11.
11.
Okay. We got
75.
1,457 pounds.
I had 1468.
It's like me, small but dense.
1468. Anybody closer than that? You got specific too.
Is that our closest one? 1468? All right.
Okay.
All right, what's the grand total, Connor?
The combined weight of all 3 bales. 4,757 pounds. 40. You must have cheated and looked at my sheet or something. Anybody closer than that? 4757. Okay.
Pretty impressive.
Good deal, yeah.
Guys, when you go home, just if you can, weigh a few hay bales just to see how much your bales are weighing. Sometimes they'll be a lot lighter, sometimes they'll be heavier than you think. So just to give you an idea. We're going to move on to the next one. Right this way.
All right, so if you haven't been convinced up to now, you know, stockpiling is the way to go, good cover on your pasture so we catch every bit of rain that comes. But this has been the kind of year where we've made a lot of hay. And I'll tell you, if you're like a lot of the folks around where I live, the hay is not as good as they would like. In fact, I've had some farmers that I'd consider to be top hay producers that are just pretty unhappy with the numbers of cuttings that got rained on or had pests, just not that kind of year. But what I want to talk to you about is testing hay and why you should test and then how to get that done. Well, first of all, we're standing in front of a barn full of what I know to be really good hay. Now, it's not all the same. Now, can you tell just by looking at this big, long barn of hay which one's the best? Can you even see any difference? I can't when I'm looking at it. Now, I know because Connor, at Chris's direction, climbed up on top of these bales and scored these bales, so we know the quality of these tests. So we run them through an NIR machine, much like the Department of Ag has, and we got a test on every single lot of hay. And of course, that lot of hay is a group of hay cut the same, managed the same, from the same field, that you would reasonably expect to be alike, right? Now, what I'm going to do is cut to the chase about why I want you to test hay. Well, first of all, number one, I'm tight. I don't like to pay for the same thing twice. Now, if you don't know what this batch of hay, what this hay tests, then all likelihood you're going to assume that it's just hay, right? It's just grass hay, and all this is just grass hay. But I know for a fact that the hay right behind me is 50% higher in crude protein, which is the most expensive nutrient to buy, and higher in energy to boot compared to everything else in this barn. So how do we know that? Because we tested it. The other reason to test is, and it's the most insidious reason to test, and that is you unintentionally underfeeding animals so they're not meeting your performance goals. We take round bales like this, and most of the time they're going into a pregnant cow. And so if they're dry and they're not going to calve until spring, then this hay is going to be, going to fit the bill pretty closely. But we ran rations based on feeding a 1,250 pound cow in lactation. So this is a mature cow that has had a calf, milking the calf, and what do you want her to do right away? Rebreed, right? So if we talk about the hay that's more common, that's more average, and if you don't know it's average, then that cow goes into having her calf on a level, not an increasing plane of nutrition. And Les Anderson and any nutritionist worth their salt is going to tell you that means that cow is not going to milk. She's not going to rebreed very fast. Her calf is not going to be healthy because oftentimes there's so much of a nutritional strain on the system that they will not even respond to vaccines that you give them. So we don't want to be surprised and underfeed an animal. So let's talk about what happens when we get a test. We've got those numbers in hand. UK has a computer program called the UK Beef Cow Forage Supplement Tool. And we've run every lot of hay through this tool. What you'll need is dry matter, crude protein, neutral detergent fiber, which is one of your lab numbers, and total digestible nutrients, which is a calculated figure based on fiber. And what that's able to tell you is what types of things you're going to need to feed to a cow once you decide the stage of production you want to shoot for. Now, I've already told you, thank you, Chris, that we're trying to feed a 1,250 pound lactating cow. This is that good lot of hay. What we need is only a little bit of corn or a little bit of soy hulls. Chances are this hay is going to be adequate just as it is to feed that cow so she maintains flesh. Now if you go to any one of these down this rest of this row, you'll find that they need anywhere from 6 to 10 pounds of soy hulls, and in some cases just corn will do it. Some of them are so low that you'll have to feed so much corn that they will not be digesting the forage. So let's talk about what we know about testing hay. Testing hay is testing hay bales like this, getting enough samples so it's representative, sending it to a good lab. The Department of Ag is a certified laboratory. Pick a lab, just get it tested. Then when you have those numbers, run them through a tool that's going to help you know how to feed it. So A, you're not buying the same nutrition twice, and B, you're not unintentionally underfeeding a set of livestock. Okay. Questions?
Does it have to be dry forage? Could you run it off the forage that's in the field right now, the green matter?
You could run it off the forage that's in the field right now. What happens though between the field and the hay bale, there are some losses sometimes in quality. But you could do that. Yes, you could. That'd be the best it could ever be.
If you want to get an idea of what you had, what quality in the pasture, you could take a grab sample in the pasture. You want to take it kind of similar to how the cow would be grazing, so you need to watch her and see what she's eating and pull some of that. But chances are most pasture forage is going to be adequate to meet the needs of that cow, as long as there's enough dry matter there.
Yeah. All right.
So we'd like to let
Yes.
Kim Fields just say a few things. Kim's from the Department of Agriculture, and she runs the forage testing program for the Department of Agriculture.
Hello everybody, hope you've had a good day. Nice beautiful day out here. It's always beautiful here. I gave everybody a forage testing brochure, and Dr. Henning was talking about the analysis report. If you look on the last page, that gives you the information on what's on your analysis report. So with the Department of Agriculture, we test for nutritional and energy levels. You use this for your ration balance, or if you're going to sell your hay. The one thing with testing your hay, if you don't know what you're testing, then of course you're either overfeeding or underfeeding. So it's going to wind up costing you. Either you're going to have an unhealthy cow, you're going to have a vet bill, something to that effect. So the best way to have the good practices is to have your hay tested. And then when you get the analysis report back, you contact your extension agent. They should be on your speed dial. Your agents should be your best friends. So you get him to come out, and then he'll help you, like I said, set your ration balance. We used to do field samples. We don't anymore. Jim Wade retired, so now it's just myself. So now it's up to the agent and the producer to pull a sample, send it to me, we analyze it, and then I send you back the analysis report. And up here I've got a couple of different probing tools that you can look at to see if something might be interesting to you. Has anybody had your hay tested either with the department or out with Dairy One or Cumberland Valley or anybody? You have? Okay. Do you feel that it has benefited you? Were you able to find out where you was your quality there that you wanted?
I buy my hay, so it's just
oh, you bought your hay. Okay.
to see what I actually got.
And that's a great thing right there too, because you know when you buy hay, anybody can, and I'm not saying anything bad about anybody, but somebody can say, oh yeah, this is a good alfalfa orchard, and this is going to be the best thing that you can have. Then you get it back, and I've actually had this. The person that bought the hay wound up, her hay was only 5%. So she didn't know what she was buying. She bought it as what someone said it was and then brought it back. And that brings a good point. If you're going to buy hay or sell hay, always have a contract. You want to make sure that you are covered, and so is the purchaser. But you can tell on these bales behind me and in front of me, they have some sort outside and inside. When we ask you to send in the lot, we're talking about same field, same cutting. What that does is it makes sure that you know that field A is field A, field B is field B and C, because if you randomly take different ones, you're not going to get a good average of what your lot is. So you can see back here they've got flags on it, so that's showing them the different lots. I'm not for sure here in the barn.
Got a map of the barn.
Okay, that's great. You know, that's one of the best things that you can do is make sure you map it out, put your cutting dates and your bale dates, and as Chris was talking about how much they weigh, especially if if you're going to sell them too. But it's one of the best things that you can do for your animal, one of the best things that you can do for your wallet. I always like to make fun with Tom Keene. He comes around, I always mention bling. And maybe, one of those trucks that somebody wants to get. If you save your money, we might be able to get you some bling, and you might be able to get you a truck. But we don't guarantee that you're going to do that. But we do know that you're going to have a much healthier livestock.
So guys, one thing to make sure is that when you take a hay sample, you want your samples only as good as your sampling technique. So you want to get a representative sample of each hay lot, and each hay lot, again, as Jimmy stated, is one cutting and one field. And you want to get about 20 cores from each hay lot, and you want to send all 20 cores, put them in a bag, and send them into Kim. It'll be about a quart of forage. Don't send an excessively large sample, and don't split your sample. You want to send the whole sample in. Kim will grind the whole sample and then do analysis on that. When you start separating the sample out, a lot of times you lose the fine pieces of forage in there, which tend to have the highest nutritive value in that hay sample.
And if you want to sample your own hay, you can go on our website, or you can go on foragetesting.org, and it walks you through the correct procedure of how to take a core sample, label it, and then on our website it goes into more detail of what, because we have a sample request form that we like for everybody to fill out to make sure that I've got the correct information. That's the one thing, because sometimes I'll get and it'll say mixed. So I don't know if that's mixed with grass and legume or if it's just different grasses. So it's good to make sure that you clarify on what you're sending me, because I want to make sure each calibration is different. So we have 9 different calibrations that we certify and do this 4 times a year. So I want to make sure I get everything correct for you. We still have our for sale website. If people, if you're buying, this shows hay that has already been tested and gives you the information. But if you all have excess hay and would like to sell it, we would be more than happy to help you market it. Is there any questions from anybody about why we're taking the forage sample, or how to do it, or any other question?
I'll just mention real quick, the program Jimmy was showing you is available online. Just Google UKY Forage Supplement Tool. and it's available online. It's also, if you're a person who uses applications on your phone, it's available as a phone app too, online. You can download it to your phone.
I forgot ours is $10 per sample and per lot. So then again, we suggest same field, same cutting.
Which is about half the cost of a commercial lab. But this is being subsidized through the state budget for farmers in the Commonwealth of Kentucky.
Actually, this program's been going for 30 years, and
Yeah.
a lot of people have not heard about it. So I'm blessed to be able to work with it. But if you have any questions or anything, my email and telephone number's on the brochure. Contact your extension agent if you have questions. They'll be able to help you, but we will get you help getting your forage sampled and getting it into me.
All right, let's go have some lunch, guys.